Hello, and welcome to the Geopolitics Explained podcast. Donald Trump has had a busy few weeks. He has made moves at home with the government shutting down, a meeting of military generals at Quantico in Virginia, and the deployments of the National Guard have been expanding. I was going to continue discussing my series on the Indo-Pacific today, but Trump's aggressive crackdown domestically is clear to see here. And so today, we're instead going to pivot and we're going to discuss what Trump's aims are domestically, before then diving into the domestic issues that I've mentioned here and where we're likely heading next. To begin in discussing Trump's long-term political aims, back in May, I wrote a post that covered Project 2025, Schedule F, and Agenda 47. Trump is tied to each to varying degrees, but they all give us hints as to where Trump wants to take the United States over the coming years. Trump, during his election campaign, distanced himself from Project 2025, but some of the group's policies, including dismantling the administrative state, are policies that Trump is actively pursuing since he re-entered office. Dismantling the administrative state is Trump's approach to tackling the deep state and bureaucracy in the US government. This applies to federal departments, such as the Department of Justice and the State Department, and independent agencies like the SEC and the Federal Reserve. We are now seeing independence questioned in the Federal Reserve, with Stephen Moran now on the Federal Reserve Board, and with Trump's push to fire Lisa Cook, which further undermines Federal Reserve independence. I've discussed in the past Trump's economic agenda, how he wants a weak dollar, and how he wants to potentially pursue the Mar-a-Lago Accord, which would see treasuries swapped out for longer duration bonds with lower yields. We haven't seen this come to fruition yet, but there are some signs that this is being pursued. As I stated at the time when I was discussing this potential economic pursuit, Scott Bessent is the man that you want to look towards for any potential developments here. But to go back to Trump and dismantling the administrative state, we've also seen Trump clash with the FBI, and this has led to the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey on 2 charges. The dismantling of the administrative state is also connected to Schedule F. Schedule F is so named because this was the name of the new employment category that was created with the executive order back in Trump's first term. The plan of this executive order was to strip protections from civil servants who were deemed, quote, disloyal. They could then be fired and replaced at will. Of course, Trump lost in 2020, and so we didn't find out what would have happened. But now he's back in office, a similar strategy could be pursued under the guise of the dismantling of the administrative state. Trump is also scrapping with the Supreme Court across a range of policy issues, including tariffs, deportations, ICE, and the National Guard deployments. The Supreme Court is one of the final checks and balances against the government. Yes, bureaucracy is an issue, and decision-making needs to be streamlined to improve productivity in the United States, but doing this to gain power and control is the opposite of political free will and independence. If we collect all this together, the main aim here seems to be that Trump wants to reassert presidential control over the United States. The biggest worry in his current pursuits are that everyday people will suffer from reduced freedoms and authoritarianism will rise within the United States. Agenda 47, the third of the important documents that I discussed back in May, is where we learn the most about Trump's pursuits. This is his campaign manifesto that was first published in December 2022 for all to see. Because of this, none of what is happening today should come as a surprise, because it has been laid out years in advance. Agenda 47 includes the following policies: cutting funding to schools teaching critical race theory, implementing significant fines on schools that Trump believes are discriminating against students, appointing 100 US attorneys that align with Trump's policies, investigating left-leaning attorneys, deploying the National Guard, suspending visa programs, reinstating travel bans from certain countries, proposing baseline tariffs, slashing federal regulation, building a missile defense shield, and getting Europe to pay the United States back for military stockpiles that have been sent to Ukraine. These policies are also only scraping the surface. My focus today is that Trump will continue to seek to centralize power, to weaken independent agencies, to purge political opponents, and to defund or abolish agencies that are contrary to Trump's agenda. None of this is good for the freedom of everyday people. Now, this sets us up for two such examples of Trump's attempts to centralize power that we've seen in the last week. The first was the government shutdown. Now, the government shutdown is playing directly into Trump's hands. The White House has threatened mass layoffs if the shutdown persists, and thousands of federal employees are set to be furloughed. This raises concerns that Trump could pursue mass firings against those who are deemed disloyal. He could then appoint those who agree with his policies and want to carry his agenda forward. Last week, Trump also said that he would meet with the head of the Office of Management and Budget to cut Democrat agencies, which also supports his desire to remove political opponents from positions of power. This government shutdown is largely driven by a disagreement over healthcare. The Democrats are hoping to ensure health insurance subsidies for those with low incomes and to reverse Trump's cuts to Medicaid. But as a part of the shutdown, approximately $8 billion in funding for federal energy projects were also cancelled in Democrat-run states. The government will remain closed until Congress can agree on federal funding allocations. Trump then has to sign this bill into law. A temporary spending bill could also be passed in an attempt to buy more time to negotiate. Both sides currently continue to blame the other for the government shutdown, but Trump and the Republicans are currently winning the narrative war in US politics. Trump and the Republicans are currently pushing their agenda and narrative undisturbed, and the Democrats seem to have few answers. The shutdown will increase recession risks, and with economic data being paused, this leads policymakers to potentially having to make decisions with a lot less data to guide these decisions. Last Friday, ADP payrolls unexpectedly fell to negative 32,000. This is the worst since March 2023, and it shows that employment is experiencing some negative pressures. In looking forward in this situation with the government shutdown, it seems the Democrats may have to back down, because if they don't, Trump is getting what he wants with regard to clearing out government of those who are disloyal to him. If this does happen, Trump will once again maintain tight control over the narrative in US politics. But if this narrative is flipped and Trump is seen as the one to blame, he could take a hit, especially if this government shutdown follows through to the economy. But based on the narrative that has been peddled since Trump returned to office, the Democrats have been invisible. As a result of this, I expect that they will eventually back down. Moving on now, the other big news story from the last week domestically was the military meeting at Quantico. This meeting at Quantico saw military leaders flocking in from around the world, but this wasn't a meeting to gauge security. It was a meeting to gauge loyalty. These military officers were told by Trump to prepare to oversee more crime and civil unrest domestically. Trump wants to use American cities as a training ground for the military to go after, quote, the enemy within. Essentially, this is Trump continuing the domestic pursuit against anybody who disagrees with him. Pete Hegseth also stated that the Pentagon was leaving behind political correctness, was loosening discipline, and was restoring a, quote, war-fighting ethos. Generals who disagreed with this approach were told by Hegseth that they could leave the military. We continue to see Trump fuel the political fragmentation in the United States and to attack his political opponents. This is an attempt to instill fear in anybody who disagrees with Trump. We recently saw a federal judge rebuke the Trump administration's use of the military in Los Angeles in September. In response, a top Department of Homeland Security official, Gregory Bavino, then set about questioning this judge's loyalty to his country. This is the epitome of Trump's pursuit. How much more of this could we see in years to come? Going back to the military meeting in Quantico, Trump and Hegseth seemingly sought to recruit the military for this domestic crackdown against opponents. The biggest worry is the merging of lines between military and politics, and this was a stark reminder of Trump's pursuit of power across all domestic realms in the United States. This is, notably, the sort of pursuit that you see in authoritarian nations. Looking forward, if we look at Trump's Agenda 47, his campaign manifesto, this lays out that we can continue to expect more of the same, because the policies that are included in Agenda 47 have been followed through upon. Trump's administration is growing more authoritarian, and the biggest worry is the loss of freedom as he attempts to incite fear against a large proportion of the American population. So, to finish, we can see how Trump is incentivized to pursue every strategy he is pursuing domestically. Firstly, because he told us that if he was voted back into power, this is what he would do. But also because these moves are allowing him to centralize power and control. These changes and policies that Trump is pursuing arrive so quickly that it is overwhelming, confusing, and difficult to keep up with. Ultimately, this is the aim. Trump will continue to release these sweeping changes at pace, and by the time we know it, the fabric of American politics will have dramatically changed. As I've reiterated many times, the worry is that this trend is an authoritarian one. Outside of the domestic moves that Trump has been making, there have also been further geopolitical moves that the Trump administration has made in the last week. We've seen more vessels hit in the South Caribbean Sea off the coast of Venezuela, and the 20-point plan for Gaza was presented. Next episode, I'll dive into the 20-point plan for Gaza and how geopolitical actors in the region have responded to it. Most importantly, I'll then explore the impact on the Palestinians and whether they agree or disagree with this Trumpian vision. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode, why not leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice? I've been Dylan. I'll talk to you next time.